Some things in life are inevitable, and without prior planning for things like a will or a trust, so is probate. Now, that process can be long and confusing, and more aren't prepared for what's to come. That's why this morning I'm joined by Corey Schmutz from Jeffrey Burr's law firm to help explain all. Good morning, Corey. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm very good. This something is something that obviously, I need to learn about too. So what is probate and how long does that take?
Yeah, probate is just the court process. If someone passes away and they own assets, it's the court system where we get those assets transferred from the deceased person to whoever their beneficiaries are. And it's quite a long process, unfortunately. Typically, we're telling people it takes just about a year from start to finish.
Now, I hear the term lawyer and court, and I hear a whole year. That says to me that it could probably be expensive. Is it something that costs a lot of money or can do?
It does. Unfortunately, it's pretty difficult to do by yourself. So most people hire an attorney to help them go through the process. And, the fees are set out in the statute. Just as an example, typically if we have like a $300,000 estate, which could just be a house, that'll usually run you about $9,000 in attorney fees and another $1,000 in court costs. So it does get very expensive, unfortunately.
Okay, so what's the best way about going, trying to avoid going to probate? How do we do that?
Yeah, great question. So it's pretty easy to avoid probate. You have to do a little planning ahead of time. And as estate planners, we kind of have a lot of tools in our toolbox that can help people avoid probate. So we use revocable trusts or living trusts quite often. Sometimes we use beneficiary designations. So if you meet with an attorney and you plan ahead, it's pretty simple to avoid the probate. You just kind of have to do it ahead of time.
So how are assets distributed if there is no will?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. A lot of people come in and they're like, well, I have to do something or else the state's going to get all my money. And that's not the case. The state statute actually has a default set of rules. We call them the intestacy statutes. And those statutes outline how your assets get distributed in the case that you don't have a will. So, if you're married, a lot of times your spouse will get part of it, your kids will get part of it. And sometimes people are just fine with the way those default rules work, but other times it creates a complete mess and, your assets are getting distributed to someone you completely didn't want them to go to.
Corey, you clearly come with a wealth of knowledge on this subject. So just for our viewers, how important is it to use a firm with probate experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the things that we run into is sometimes we'll have clients come over and they've used somebody that didn't really have a lot of experience in probate, and it just delays the process, and you get into some of these traps and pitfalls where instead of taking a year, it might add several months onto the process. So if you use somebody that does it every day, we know exactly what the court wants. We know all the different rules and nuances of probate. So real important to use somebody that has a lot of experience doing probate.
Just a final quick question. How do you approach the subject of speaking to an elderly relative or parent about making sure they have their estate in order and their will up to date?
Yeah, and sometimes that could be a difficult conversation because some people don't like to talk about that. It can get a little tricky. But, really what you're doing is making sure their wishes get met. And if they do their planning, then, they know whatever they wanted to happen with their assets will actually happen. So I think that's the most important piece there, is we're following their wishes to make sure they get what they wanted.
Corey, great information. Thank you for sharing with our viewers. To learn more, head to jeffreyburr.com. Their address is also right there on your screen.